it. He took well and pulled 'em in most excellent for 9 weeks. At the expiration of that period, when his head was a sight, he expressed one evening, the last company having been turned out and the door shut, a wish to have a little music. "Mr. Chops," I said, I never dropped the Mister with him, the world might do it, but not me. "Mr. Chops, are you sure as you are in a state of mind and body to sit upon the organ?" His answer was this: "Toby, when next met with on the tramp, I forgive her and the Indian." And I am. It was with fear and trembling that I began to turn the handle, but he sat like a lamb. It will be my belief to my dying day that I see his head expand as he sat. You may therefore judge how great his thoughts was. He sat out all the changes, and then he come off. "Toby," he says, with a quiet smile, "the little man will now walk 3 times round the carawan and retire behind the curtain." When we called him in the morning, we found him gone into a much better society than mine or Pall Mall's. I give Mr. Chops as comfortable a funeral as lay in my power, followed myself as chief, and had the George the Fourth canvas carried first in the form of a banner. But the house was so dismal arterwards that I give it up, and took to the wan again. "I don't triumph," said Jarber, folding up the second manuscript, and looking hard at Trottle. "I don't triumph over this worthy creature. I merely ask him if he is satisfied now." "How can he be anything else?" I said, answering for Trottle, who sat obstinately silent. "This time, Jarber, you have not only read us a delightfully amusing story, but you have also answered the question about the house. Of course it stands empty now. Who would think of taking it after it had been turned into a caravan?" I looked at Trottle as I said those last words, and Jarber waved his hand indulgently in the same direction. "Let this excellent person speak," said Jarber. "You were about to say, my good man?" "I only wish to ask, sir," said Trottle doggedly, "if you would kindly oblige me with a date or two in connection with that last story." "A date?" repeated Jarber. "What does the man want with dates?" "I should be glad to know, with great respect," persisted Trottle, "if the person named Magsman was the last tenant who lived in the house. It's my opinion, if I may be excused for giving it, that he most decidedly was not." With those words, Trottle made a low bow, and quietly left the room. There is no denying that Jarber, when we were left together, looked sadly discomposed. He had evidently forgotten to inquire about dates; and in spite of his magnificent talk about his series of discoveries, it was quite as plain that the 2 stories he had just read had really and truly exhausted his present stock. I thought myself bound in common gratitude to help him out of his embarrassment by a timely suggestion. So I proposed that he should come to tea again on the next Monday evening, the 13th, and should make such inquiries in the meantime as might enable him to dispose triumphantly of Trottle's objection. He gallantly kissed my hand, made a neat little speech of acknowledgment, and took his leave. For the rest of the week I would not encourage Trottle by allowing him to refer to the house at all. I suspected he was making his own inquiries about dates, but I put no questions to him. On Monday evening, the 13th, that dear unfortunate Jarber came, punctual to the appointed time. He looked so terribly harassed that he was really quite a spectacle of feebleness and fatigue. I saw at a glance that the question of dates had gone against him, that Mr. Magsman had not been the last tenant of the house, and that the reason of its emptiness was still to seek. "What I have gone through," said Jarber, "words are not eloquent enough to tell. O Sophonisba, I have begun another series of discoveries. Accept the last two as stories laid on your shrine, and wait to blame me for leaving your curiosity unappeased until you have heard number 3. Number 3 looked like a very short manuscript, and I said as much. Jarber explained to me that we were to have some poetry this time. In the course of his investigations he had stepped into the circulating library to seek for information on the one important subject. All the library people knew about the house was, that a female relative of the last tenant, as they believed, had, just after that tenant left, sent a little manuscript poem to them, which she described as referring to events that had actually passed in the house, and which she wanted the proprietor of the library to publish. She had written no address on her letter, and the proprietor had kept the manuscript ready to be given back to her, the publishing of poems not being in his line, when she might call for it. She had never called for it, and the poem had been lent to Jarber, at his express request, to read to me. Before he began, I rang the bell for Trottle, being determined to have him present at the new reading, as a wholesome check on his obstinacy. To my surprise, Peggy answered the bell, and told me that Trottle had stepped out without saying where. I instantly felt the strongest possible conviction that he was at his old tricks, and that his stepping out in the evening without leave meant philandering. Controlling myself on my visitor's account, I dismissed Peggy, stifled my indignation, and prepared, as politely as might be, to listen to Jarber. End of Chapter 3. Recording by Ruth Golding.